You're listening to the Joy Tax Podcast, a conversation series for parents and caregivers raising a child or teen with complex chronic conditions. The normal parenting wisdom doesn't fit the situations we are living through. This is a forum to share, affirm, and learn from each other. It's also a window for allies to listen in and gain deeper insight into the world we inhabit. This podcast is not a substitute for medical guidance. We encourage you to always talk to your healthcare provider before making any medical decisions. Welcome to the Joy Tax Podcast. I'm Mercedes, and this is an ongoing series with parents and caregivers of children and teens with energy limiting conditions such as MECFS, long COVID, POTS, MCAS, and other sometimes what feels like mysterious conditions. I'm here today with my good friend Kimberly. We became friends almost 2 years ago now, and I've invited her here to talk about the role of friendship in caring for our kids, how parents, moms, and dads, how we need our own support crew. And so welcome, Kim, and could you just maybe begin with talking about what life was like before? We've talked so much over the years, I guess now, about our challenges, but I've never really asked you what life was like before your son was sick.
Such a great question, and it's so good to be here with you. Let me just say, I'm so happy to be here.
I'm so glad you're here.
Life before, it's almost impossible to remember. It's been so long with life with, but life before my son got sick was pretty run of the mill. My kiddo was about 10 years old, really, before he got sick. And he loved to run and climb trees and play tag. And he wasn't so much into competitive sports, but any chance to be outside playing, swimming, and just be with other kids in nature was like the most amazing thing for him. He was definitely a camp kid, especially in the summers. He wanted to be with kids all day long. He's an only child. And he was just really, really active. He was never a good napper. He he had lots of energy and lots of opinions. And he was actually sort of an amazing advocate. This is a kid who at 6 to 7 years old made an environmental documentary that won the Colorado Environmental Film Festival, and we flew to Colorado, and he was up there on the big screen answering questions for all these grown-ups, in front of 200 people. And he was raising money for anything to do with ocean awareness, and he was just really community oriented.
And what is life like now?
Life is isolating. Life is so isolating. As you know, we've talked about so many times having a kiddo or now a teen with long COVID. He has no siblings, so he has been more or less in his room on his own for 4 years, with intermittent guests coming over. But when you have friendships at such a young age, they don't last for hanging around for sick kiddos. The healthy kiddos move on, and they should. They go and live their lives and do sports, and after a few months or a few years, they really don't have much in common with an energy limiting condition.
So, how long has he been sick now?
In December, it will be 4 years.
Do you ever grieve a part of his childhood?
All the time. I catch a photo of him or like a memory of him before. He was taking horseback riding lessons right up until the moment he got sick, and he was in a little movie, and he was just riding and outside and full of life. And I look at those pictures, and it catches me in the throat, in the stomach, in the gut, everywhere. Do you?
Do I? Oh, all the
Yeah.
time. And sometimes I think I'm okay. But, my daughter, as you know, this year is able to go to school part-time, 3 mornings a week. And this week there was one morning where, because of poor sleep, she couldn't go, or she had to go late. And it made me burst into tears in my room while I was getting dressed and ready for work. Not because it's bad, but just because I thought, here we go again. And because 3 mornings a week to go to school seems like so little to ask for.
Yeah, it does. We've talked about this endlessly. It's so easy to get excited for them when they feel good. And as parents, it's so crushing the second things devolve, because we know, this one day could turn into 4 more years.
Yeah.
And we don't want to allow it, and we don't have really any control over it.
One thing that I really struggle with is how to communicate that fear, both to doctors and to family members and friends on the outside, because when our kids are tired, it is a different kind of tired. I think it'd be one thing if our kids were just tired and napping and then they woke up and they were refreshed, but that is not what the situation is. How do you think we can communicate that fear?
It's such a good question. They have all these things like the spoon theory, and, you have 10 spoons in a day, but other people on the outside don't really get that. It's so hard to get it if you don't live with it day in, day out. I honestly think that unless somebody comes to your home and sees it and stays for a day or stays for 2 days, it's really hard to get it.
Yeah.
Like, for example, an old friend came over yesterday, and she said, your son seems to be doing great today. Why are you bringing food up to him? And I said, because he's doing great right now. But the more that I can prevent a crash later, I'm going to, because a walk up and down the stairs may seem like nothing, but I'm saving his energy, because, that could easily become a crash later.
I do the exact same thing. In fact, I think there's been times when we've been texting or talking on the phone where we're both making snack trays for our kids and delivering them. But I do things like, my kiddo wants to have a play date and she's been pretty isolated. And so I will clean her room for her and do things that maybe in another situation I would have her do, or say something like, well, if you don't clean your room, your friend can't come over. But that's not how it works in our house. I clean her room so her friend can come over, and that's where her energy can be spent.
I literally just did the same thing before this podcast. I literally just finished cleaning his room so he could have a friend drop over, a new friend. And so maybe he could have like 15, 20 extra minutes of energy before the inevitable exhaustion afterwards, because we know there will be exhaustion afterwards.
Yeah.
And it's not just tired, like you said. It as though their body is filled with concrete, and inside that concrete is pain. And then you're asking them, with that pain and that concrete, to run up a hill and run down and act like nothing happened.
And I don't think people get that our kids actually, or at least my daughter, feels a little bit of grief that she can't help the way that her sister can. She made a poster for school trying to teach her peers about what post-exertional malaise is. And it said the good things are you get to sleep in, you get to sleep all day, you get to watch as much TV as you want, and you don't have to do chores. And then it said the bad things are you sleep all day, but you don't want to. And you watch TV, but it gets boring, and you want to help, but you can't.
It's exactly how I would describe it too. Wow, that's an amazing poster. I think she did a great job. No, I can't wait to see it. Yeah, that's exactly how I would describe it too.
How do you ever feel judged by others for these accommodations we give our kids?
I'd say 23 hours a day. I really do, because I live in a place that, for better or for worse, I don't know anyone else struggling with long COVID, ME/CFS, and I don't know any other children at the moment. That doesn't mean they're not out there, but I live in a, tiny little hamlet, and we haven't been out a ton, obviously, because of my kiddo's illness. So, having neighbors watch, well, he can walk downstairs and back. He can walk outside to the tree and back. So why is he not in school today? I worry about that all the time. And some of the judgments are, I'd say, a little bit more obvious than others. Some are a little bit more vocal. Those are the ones that really hurt.
Yeah.
The judgments by doctors, the judgments by teachers, by institutions, rather than by singular entities.
There's so much pressure to get our kids to school, and in another episode we talk about this. And yet I have come to this place, and I used to be a homeschool parent during the pandemic, and I made my kids do a lesson of math every day. I made them do writing assignments. I did all the things, and I worried about them falling behind. And now I very much have there are other more important things. And, we're both educators, and we both value education. And yet I'm in this place where going to school for my kiddo, the greatest thing about it is the connection with her peers. Everything else is kind of secondary. Everything in our lives really revolves around this idea of joy. Does it bring meaning and joy? And this summer I was really concerned that my kiddo might not learn how to add and subtract fractions. And then I went, wait, I never learned how to add and subtract fractions, and somehow I'm okay.
Exactly.
Do you go through some of those feelings?
All the time. And I am constantly adjusting my expectations and what I think is, quote unquote, normal. My kiddo, I didn't really worry as much about the school piece when he was like in 5th grade and even 6th grade. But now that we're entering 8th grade, I'm terrified every day. Well, what about high school? What about college? And then I also catch myself, because you can't learn it all if you don't have decent mental health. Yeah. And being isolated for that long cannot contribute to decent mental health.
Yeah.
So like you, I prioritize play dates with anyone he feels a connection with. Yeah. And, in going to therapy on my own, even my therapist would say the same thing, that human connection is one of the most life-saving things. If you think about like elderly people, if they're not connected with anyone, they don't tend to do very well for very long.
And I guess when I hear you talk about institutions, that's the piece that I wish that they would understand, is how desperately we want our kids to be at school, how desperately we don't want another doctor's appointment.
Exactly. And they want to be there just as much, if not more. And, I asked, like you, my son is going just extremely part-time. We're trying for 1 hour a day to build up from there. Because the first day he went for 6 hours and he couldn't get out of bed for a month. So now we're starting with baby steps. And, at 1 hour a day, I said, how does it feel to be in school? And he said, well, it feels great, but I'm a complete ghost. And I said, what do you mean? He goes, what? Just what I said. I'm a ghost. Nobody really knows that I'm there or knows that I leave. I don't know anyone there. And I slip in and out of social studies. And that's
so hard.
It is. It's really, really hard. And he's not somebody who likes to share his feelings very much now that we're entering the teenage years.
Yeah.
And, I just sort of take it face value that that's it is how it is. He's very stoic at this point. And only when I see him just smiling endlessly, I'll say, "What's up?" And he'll look shocked and he'll say, "I just feel happy out of nowhere." And then I know it's been a 1 or 2 good days of not being in terrible pain.
You and I are both having quite different falls than in the past. What is different for you right now and for your son?
That's such a good question. And I'm going to, of course, like knock on wood, because the second I say anything positive, I'm afraid it's all going to come like a house of cards crumbling down. So the past few falls, my kiddo hasn't, literally, he tried first day of school, crashed so hard, would try again and would get another virus. And it was pretty much bedbound, being carried to the bathroom and back. So nauseous, looking into feeding tubes because the nausea was constantly preventing food intake and calorie intake and water intake and all that fun stuff. And researching, as a parent, just thousands of hours of researching what can be done, what is on the horizon, what about in other countries. And, just sort of complete burnout with how to pass the days. They're so tired of TV. They're so tired of electronics, and they don't necessarily have the cognitive wherewithal to read and to just, someone said, well, why doesn't he just stay at home and just study? He could basically be graduating from college at this point. And I'm like, you don't get it. Like, you don't just have endless amounts of brain power to read when you're that fatigued.
Yeah.
But this fall has been different. I literally mark calendars now on the day. I write good, bad, or so-so. And this is the first fall, starting in October, that we've had more good days than bad days. And I know that can flip at any point. And the good days are always followed by a really, really bad night. The pain and nausea always come by about 10 p.m., like clockwork. But strangely enough, we're building on a few good days. And, he's probably been to school 6 times this year, which is more than the past 3 years.
I know some people wouldn't understand this,
but
that's
wouldn't
incredible.
get it.
That's incredible that
Right?
it's incredible, and he deserves so much more too. And that fear that if you call out, this is a good day, that you're somehow upsetting a delicate cosmic balance and it's going to fall apart.
Exactly. Like, we have the control, right?
Yeah.
My gosh, if we had the control that we could just upset the cosmic balance, like, why couldn't we get them well?
I know. My daughter walked to the bridge behind our house, which is about 2 miles round trip.
Wow.
And this was a couple days ago. A year ago when she did it, plus some other energy tapping things, she wound up in a major crash and couldn't walk. And it was very, very serious. And yesterday when she went out on this walk, and then she walked to a friend's house for a little bonfire, and this is all while I'm at work, and she had a caregiver come over, or we call them hanger-outers. And I was so happy for her, but then I went to sleep that night. I went, oh, is she going to have to pay for this? Is there going to be joy tax for this?
Joy tax it's the best possible name for this podcast, because it is exactly what happens. Like, they go to a movie and they pay for it for a week.
Yeah.
Or, they have a friend over and they can't move the next day, and it's just heartbreaking.
So the premise of this podcast in part is, we're taking our kids to all these doctor's appointments. We're trying to get them better. We want to find a cure, and there is no cure, and everybody's path through it is a little bit different. But in between all that, we're trying to raise kids and give them opportunities. And I feel like you were the person that first taught me how to do it. You were the first person who helped me not feel guilty that I couldn't send my kid to school, or that I couldn't keep up with homeschooling, or that I had to make these accommodations. Do you remember how we met?
Oh my gosh. It's so funny that you say that because I feel the same way. Like, I don't really remember life without you. And I remember getting an email from you. I think it was sometime in the winter, and things were pretty bad for your kiddo, and things were pretty bad for my kiddo. And I think at one point, one of the first times we talked on the phone, I was at some airport trying to do some treatment and just sobbing on the airport floor.
And
I don't know what airport.
meanwhile, I was in Alaska sobbing in a hospital room, sleeping on the couch and crying silently. And
Exactly. And I mean, instant friendship, right? There you go.
yeah,
I mean, two moms who are trying to save their kids. And I, in the process, like in some ways, we saved each other. Like I couldn't do this without you.
I feel very much the same way. I look forward to your messages every day, or the way that when my kiddo's having a bad day, that you get it, that there's somebody that I can turn to. And that was for me one of the hardest things to understand, because I was always the parent who would take my kid to library group, who would read the parenting books, and then all of a sudden I went, where's the information? I want to do this.
Right.
I want to do this right. And there is no
There's no
information.
manual.
Do you remember when you first met me, after that first phone call, you sent me a giant care box, or Evelyn a care box, and it had all kinds of different supplements, and a lot of them were
I
gummies.
did? Oh my gosh, I don't even remember.
And you sent her these leg massagers that warmed, which was such a big deal, because she gets this brick-like feeling in her legs. And it just made us feel so good and so seen. And it had an added effect, because about a year and a half later, an old friend of mine, her son started having leg pains and mysterious symptoms. And I said, I know what to do. And I sent her the same massagers and a box full of supplements and just stuff.
Oh my gosh.
And it made her kid feel really good too.
It's amazing. It's like we're writing the manuals ourselves, and we don't know what we're doing. Yeah. But sometimes we get it right, and sometimes, I mean, I'll call you or you'll call me, and like, my kid hates me. What are we doing wrong? Because they just want to be 100%, and they're looking to us to know absolutely what to do.
And we're
trying. We're their everything.
Yeah.
It's so true. And I just remember, I think I came out somewhere into Alaska to do a treatment for my son. And I remember telling my husband, well, this woman is just going to meet me at the airport, and she's just going to stay with us the whole time. And he was like, what? And I was like, that's what we do for each other, because nobody else gets this.
Nobody else gets it. I remember that trip, and we showed up first because we live here, and we walked into the house that we were renting, and my older daughter, who doesn't have these health conditions, said to me, how do we know she's not a serial killer? And you had ordered groceries, and we were unpacking them. And I said, because would a serial killer eat granola? And they probably would, but your load of groceries looked exactly like the load of groceries we might unpack. And then we were we were all so delighted.
That's hilarious.
That you were indeed not a serial killer. And it was so fun. And I think it was really fun for the kids too.
Oh, it was. I think your girls snuck in some baby rabbits or something, and it was just like our kids actually got to be kids.
Yeah.
For just a moment. And that was amazing.
And they got to
really amazing.
They got to see somebody who was maybe like them. They don't get to see people who are like them.
No, and they don't necessarily want to.
That's true.
So, just being there with somebody like them, I think was pretty amazing.
And I think maybe we've taught them something too, just through our friendship, because they've observed us reach out and build our support network in order to support them. And I know for my kids, I think it makes them feel more secure.
I think so too. It's almost like having a second mom across the country.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. Yeah, it really is. It's kind of amazing. And just like knowing that there are multiple moms out there, dads are wonderful too, but like multiple moms who get this, It's unreal.
How do you think? I mean, we were pretty lucky that we found each other, and I knew to email you because of something you had posted on social media, and we had mutual acquaintances, and I had never really heard of long COVID in terms of how it could impact kids, but you had posted about long COVID, and so I emailed you, and then our friendship went from there. How would you suggest to other parents to build that community?
Oh my gosh. I think trying not to hold it all inside because it is so isolating.
Yeah.
And, it's really hard to say, well, hey, I have a kid who's has all these symptoms that don't make sense. Like it's really scary to be judged.
Hmm.
But I would say it's worth it to have a support system. It's worth the risk of being judged because chances are that other person out there, whoever they are, feels just as terrified and isolated as you do.
Hmm.
Um, there are still other moms that I check in with across the country. I've never met them, but we know each other's kids' names and we know to check in and we celebrate their achievements. I mean, one of the first moms I reached out to, her son with long COVID actually ended up getting much better after having his gallbladder removed. And he was, being fed by a tube.
Wow.
And he just went to college. And I was
Wow.
like so excited for this family that I have never met,
Hmm.
that lives 3,000 miles away. And it, I think, so many moms would see other kids getting better and think that's amazing. It's giving me hope instead of why isn't my kid getting better?
Hmm. For me, that's how it is. I remember recently your kiddo was having a good day and my kiddo was having a bad day. And I remember thinking, oh, but we can get through this because there's
Yeah,
another good day at some point around the corner. And I say at some point because that's why we hold our breath, right? We don't know if it's going to be a day or 3 weeks or, I don't know, 3 months.
exactly. It's the not knowing. And, you know, even looking back 3 years ago, if I would have known 3 years ago that we had another 3 years to go,
Mm.
I there's almost a benefit of not knowing because, you know, just knowing how endless that can seem is really scary.
The people that you haven't felt judged by, the people that who aren't in this chronic illness community with kids and teens, what have they done that have made you feel supported?
That's such a good question because there really are so few of them, but they're such like highly evolved human beings. um, Most of the people who have in our sort of orbit who have been like that, even just the occasional email or stopping by with a cup of coffee for me and, for her, or, hey, I picked up this, silly little fidget thing for Levi. Maybe he, just thinking he'd like it. Just kind of being not forgotten
Mm.
is huge. Just the tiniest little things. Um, I'm trying to think other things like a friend brought over something from her grill. Like I think she made some chicken from a grill and just having something different and something that we didn't have to ask for or think about. Went so far.
I think that what you just said was so important that you didn't have to ask for. Sometimes when you're in crisis, you don't know what you need. And just having somebody send a nice message or bring a meal and not expect anything back. The friends who text me and don't expect a text back, those are usually the ones I feel most secure with. Not because I don't want to text them, but because they understand that my overwhelm is real. And
Exactly.
they don't judge me for it. Can I?
Oh, that is
Um,
so great.
you brought in a tutor at one point, and that sounded like a positive outside
Yeah.
force.
It really was, and we sort of had to navigate that kind of closely because when we started we brought in a tutor for like half an hour at a time.
Hmm.
Our kid was still bedbound, and he would pull up a chair next to our child's bed and do as much math as they could. And sometimes that was really only 10 minutes. But they built such a nice little rapport that when he could come downstairs and actually do math at a table for an hour, it was kind of like this huge, amazing celebration for both of them. And, now he comes over once a week, and our kiddo who hates math looks forward to it because he's starting to understand it a little. Like pre-algebra, when you haven't done 4th, 5th, 6th, or 7th grade math, is kind of tough. It's kind of tough anyway. But I would say having a tutor who might not necessarily be like a Pulitzer Prize winner, but is just like a really good human, that was more important for us than anything.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier that we have hanger-outers that come over to hang with my kiddo. And we did that especially last year because I was working full-time and my husband was working full-time and my kiddo couldn't go to school. And towards the end of the year, we did a tutor, but mostly it was just people hanging out. And sometimes she just slept the entire time and they paid bills on the couch. But at least she knew that somebody was in the house. And when she was feeling well enough, they would take her out to lunch or do something gentle with her. And they were all willing to watch educational videos about post-exertional malaise. And it was less about doing school or whatever particular activity and more about maintaining a relationship with the outside world.
Exactly. And I think that's probably the most important thing ever. Sorry, I have a cat over here who's trying to be naughty and interrupt this podcast.
It's okay. It's fine to show the cat too if you need to.
Just having that human connection, having other people in the house besides the kiddo's parents are really important. Even if it's other adults, whoever it is, just bringing the outside world to them when they can't get to it, that's been huge.
That is huge.
Really,
and also
really huge.
It's kind of a burden. I mean, it's beautiful, but then I go, oh, my house is a wreck. There's pills everywhere. There's this feeling that you have to be presentable. And maybe the last 2 or 3 years has really taught me how to let go of a lot of things. We don't have to do a math lesson every day. It doesn't matter if we learn fractions. It doesn't matter if the house is a wreck. But because it's just so worth it. I remember one time my daughter had a caregiver come over, and the day started out just perfect, normal energy levels. And then towards the end, or maybe it was around noon, Evelyn couldn't hardly walk and started shrinking against the wall. And the caregiver or the hanger-outer texted me and said, "Now I know what you're talking about." And that was so huge. And also knowing that this person was able to get my daughter comfortable and, was willing to follow the things that I needed her to do to take care of my kiddo until I was able to get home. And because sometimes I do worry about people thinking that I'm making it up or that I'm making it worse,
Exactly.
And
and I think some people do think that, other people have told us or have suggested, like, maybe if you just kind of let him go to school all day, maybe he'll get there and he'll just work it out. Some kids, as soon as they walk in the door, like preschool, you drop off their kid and they're sad and then you leave and they're fine. Like they think it is psychological and they don't get that this has very, very little to do with anything psychological. If anything,
it's not school avoidance at all.
Yeah, it's not. And it's so easy for parents and educators to jump to that. It's really hurtful. It's damaging.
Yes. Because one of the most powerful things for me going through this has been listening to adults who started experiencing symptoms when they were children or teens, and they were told to just push through. And now they're bedbound or their lives are extremely limited, where if they had received interventions or coaching or just affirmation that what was happening in their bodies was real and legit, and given permission to rest, that they might have a different outcome. Sometimes I think for my daughter that I am honoring those voices by honoring what's happening to Evelyn, that we can do it differently this time.
That's such a good point. I think of, my dad had polio when he was my son's age, and, he was in the hospital for months and months, and I can't even imagine how isolating that was. And there was no guarantee he would walk again, but I keep thinking at least there was this blood test with a definite diagnosis, and, which is so wrong in retrospect. But it was undeniable. He had this virus called poliomyelitis, and it was documented.
Mm-hmm.
It's long COVID and ME/CFS is just, it is so difficult to make other people understand just how debilitating it is. Like, we're not talking tired. We're talking your entire day works up to you being able to bathe yourself.
Absolutely. This past week, there was, or maybe it was a couple weeks ago, I can't quite remember the timeline. There was a blood test, a study on a blood test for ME/CFS. And I don't fully understand the implications. Obviously, I can't give medical advice or speak scientifically really about much of anything. But one of the thoughts I had is this is both wonderful, but what if my kiddo didn't pass the blood test? And what do we do? Because no matter what tests there are, there's always going to be invisible conditions. And how do we as a society or as a culture get to a place where we can just say, wow, this person is hurting inside. This is real.
Exactly. Oh my, it's so funny you say that, because I had those exact same thoughts. This is so exciting. And what if my child doesn't pass? Will they think I've been making this up the whole time?
Yeah.
We're so hardwired to have, to pass a certain test, because it's not real unless you pass the test, both good and bad, in school, medically, all of it. And so many of these kids and adults are getting these normal blood tests and are being judged because they can't see what is inside of these people. And it's going to take a huge sea change, I think, in this country to really see that when people are hurting, it doesn't matter what their blood test reveals. That if they say they can't walk across the room, chances are they can't walk across the room. It's really only images that people can understand. Like, they can't understand fatigue, but they can understand concrete, and they can understand, the feeling of lying down in a dirty parking lot. But if you just say, I'm in pain, well, everyone has a different pain threshold. But if you say, hey, my blood feels like lava, that's a different kind of pain.
Yeah. Every time we go to the doctor, and this is even with doctors that I trust, and I'm fortunate to have, maybe except for we have a specialist that I know I will always be believed. But if I'm not seeing a specialist, I'm always on edge until I feel there's a kind of tone that switches, where you all of a sudden you're not being grilled, but you're being deeply listened to. And I pay attention for that because I'm always scared that they're going to minimize, like they have in the past, what's happening with my child. Or because there's all of these inexplicable symptoms, that a test won't be run that is really, really necessary. One of our worst doctor's appointments was with a pediatrician, and this goes back to just pushing through. And I thought for sure a pediatrician would be able to tell me what to do when kids get sick a lot, because that's their bread and butter, right? And
and that's what they're supposed to do.
And this doctor just looked at me, and we had driven 250 miles. I live in a very rural place, so we had to drive to the big city. And he just said, kids get sick a lot. Just like you said, send her to school, see what happens. And he didn't really want. We were just a spot in his day. He didn't really care.
Exactly. It's amazing to me the lack of curiosity that some of these doctors have. Like, we brought our child. We had waited for a neurology appointment for months and months, and our child was experiencing on and off paralysis. And we were almost excited because he was actually experiencing it at the doctor's office. Like they could see it. It was being caught on camera. And still, it was not believed. And it was written down as, it also affected his speech, so he couldn't talk. And it was written down as selective mutism.
Wow.
And I was just outraged. And when I saw that, and when the doctors actually said that to us, and I said, so all these kids across the country, they all have selective mutism, like at the same time? Is that strange? And she looked at me like I had said the single worst thing in the world. Like, how dare I question this diagnosis, which wasn't even a diagnosis. It was just bizarre.
I ask our doctor all the time how many kids in our community are on some kind of spectrum, like Evelyn is. And I'm always left with the feeling like we're a unicorn, but I've lived in my town for almost my whole life, and people come to me with all kinds of obscure things happening to their children that fall outside of the realm of what we remember growing up to be like. And my sense is that there are more cases of autonomic nervous system dysfunction and the body going awry in a post-COVID world, but if doctors aren't curious and aren't open to these symptoms that don't fit in the typical boxes, then these kids are going to be left suffering, and their parents are going to keep pushing them, and everybody's going to think it's in the kid's
dangerous.
head. Yes, it's dangerous.
Yeah. And I don't know about you, but when I find a specialist who actually listens and they actually get it, I'm overjoyed, but then I'm terrified. What happens if this doctor dies? It's the first thought. And I want to have a backup doctor who also understands, because you never want to go through that. I have nobody in the medical field who is going to support us at the moment. Like, you don't want gaps.
No. In fact, I'm in the process of looking for a backup specialist as well. And I sometimes feel, even though I feel safe with our specialist, that I need to be a little bit performative. Like, I have to be a good patient. And my daughter has to be a good patient, because we could get fired. Because, as you know, a lot of the people who are most helpful, they're private pay, and so they don't have to take you. And you feel that vulnerability. I mean, neither you or I, and we live on the polar sides of the country, have access to doctors in our hometown that are specialists and can help us when we have these bizarre moments, when our kids can't walk, when they can't talk, when my daughter sometimes gets a weird pain in her heart, and we have an appointment soon with a cardiologist. I'm just holding my breath, because there are just things that happen that there's nowhere you can take your kid. Like, we definitely don't want to take our kids to the ER. What happens when we take our kids to the ER?
Oh, the ER. It's like the bane of my existence. It is so terrifying to take our kid to the ER, because no matter what, they're busy. They're really busy, and they don't understand these, fatiguing illnesses. And yet, if you don't take them, you're a horrible parent, because who knows what has happened. I remember one time early on, we were pretty certain, we still are, that our child had a stroke, or at least a mini stroke. And we decided to take him. And he was sort of just kind of getting some of his speech and movement back at the ER. And we asked for imaging, and they said no, because children don't get strokes. And we just thought that was so bizarre. And yet we had this moment. We were there. We could have caught it.
Your story reminds me of something that just happened this week to a friend I know. Their child was experiencing a partial paralysis. They went to the ER, and the paralysis began wearing off. And we were texting, kind of like you used to do. You used to coach me through the doctor's appointments over text. And I said, ask for imaging. And the doctor said, well, we don't think that we need to do that because it's wearing off. Well, kids don't just go partially paralyzed.
Right. It's generally not something that happens normally.
No. And it's not something you can really fake either.
It is so true. And where is that sense of curiosity. I mean, aren't these doctors ever like, this is really interesting, like just intellectually, why is this happening?
And it's so interesting how, I mean, no, it's not just the kids that are accused of it being anxiety
Yeah,
or in their heads.
it's the
It's the
parents.
parents.
Yeah.
What are we doing to feed into it? And the
Oh,
fact that we are worried and concerned sometimes goes against us because
exactly.
the fatter my daughter's file got at our local clinic, the less seriously I felt I was taken. And then I began to get emotional. And so then I was
Mhm.
taken that much less seriously. And then we wound up in the hospital for
Exactly.
a week. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's almost as if you have to go in stone cold. You cannot be emotional. You show your documents
mhm.
and you say, okay, when they say we don't really know what this is, and you have to say, okay, what is the differential diagnosis? I had never heard that term before, but now I say it at every appointment. If you can't tell me what's wrong, at least tell me the differential diagnosis.
You're
And
the
that
one.
really catches them.
You're the one that taught me that. You would text me. There was one doctor who was making me feel really uncomfortable, suggesting that my daughter had conversion disorder or functional neurological disorder, which is its own topic altogether. But I had some serious concerns about access to testing and follow up and judgment on my behalf. And you texted me, ask her about a differential diagnosis, and that was so helpful. Can I ask what is getting you through this week? What three things maybe are giving you hope?
I would say Mercedes, Mercedes, and Mercedes. No. Aside from our friendship, I would definitely say just having the school routine coming back. There's no school on Monday, but knowing that my kiddo went the past 2 days and then just having it there rather than having nothing planned.
Mm.
Trying to get him there for the next few days that's really exciting. Um, and also just kind of having a different weather pattern coming in. We've had a really gorgeous long autumn, and now it's kind of getting colder,
Mm.
and we're in the house a little bit more, and it's getting darker earlier, which my kiddo has a lot of sleep disorders, so it's actually been helping him sleep a little bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Like well, nature's kind of doing its thing, and it's
Good.
helping us a little bit.
Good. Those are
What
really.
about you?
Oh, what am our friendship for sure. And
Yeah.
also this gentle school routine that we're in.
Hmm.
My daughter has had 3 play dates this weekend, which just blows my mind. She got to go and see a
Wow.
movie. And so those things are giving me hope. But also, we
Hmm.
haven't talked a lot about what this does to a sibling relationship, but it's hard.
Yeah.
And last night, my daughters had a dance party. It almost makes me choke up to just see them
Oh
playing
my
with each other.
gosh.
And so and my oldest said to me this week, we can't go back. We're not going to get what we had before. And to see, my daughter got sick when she was 9, was when things hit the fan. She's 11, going on 12 now. But to see that there is something different ahead gives me hope. It's not what we thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
I too grieve parts of her childhood that was lost, but there's so much good to come that we don't get to know what it is yet, but it's going to be there. I have faith.
Yeah, it is. It will definitely be there.
Well, thank you so much. And I also want to give a shout out of thank you to my daughters who provided me the space this afternoon and the quiet to record this podcast, and all of you listeners. Thank you so very much.